Hello. Today, I thought I would talk about our setup fight that happened on Sunday. To give a little context to the situation, Janeway ran the podcast on Friday of last week. I couldn't be there. I was out of town for a funeral, so I was gone till Saturday. So I couldn't, unfortunately, make the podcast, talk about anything. But Jane handled it perfectly fine, and she managed to actually get all the GMs ready and talking. And it was really cool to see because a lot of people were willing to put all the bullshit to the side, put everything, ego, pride, whatever it is, and just be like, you know what? All right, let's fight. Let's do some setup fights. We'll randomize the teams. We'll randomize the nodes. We'll try and make it as fair as possible so that way nobody gets left out. Nobody gets, upset. I think it's very difficult to do that last part where people aren't left out or upset or they feel like the teams are unbalanced or whatever. I feel like that part is very difficult to do because, the gap between some of the guilds are very, very large. I think there's only a couple of the top end guilds that really kind of go neck and neck with each other. And then like when you go past those guilds, the gap becomes larger and larger. And then just between the first and second guild, the gap is pretty astronomical to the point where it's like in a 1v1 scenario, it's very hard for like anybody to really have fun because it's just not necessarily like they're just not there yet mechanically. And I think that's like the biggest issue. So when you incorporate the number 1 guild and then the number 2 guild, 3 guild, 4 and 5, right, like all the top end, and then you try and filter that out and pick teams, it's like the 1 and 2 guilds, like the gap on those are pretty high, and then like below that is like where you kind of have the neck and neck rivalry kind of situation. So it's difficult to place teams because you could do well, the big guilds are team captains, right? Sacred's team captain, Flow's team captain, right? So then you just pick from there and then pick the second and third and whoever else of the second guilds that are on par and better to even things out, right? But when you go below that even further, that's where the levels are astronomical and you're like, well, this guild is vastly better than this guild, and it's like, oh shit, well, this is not fair because now we have these 2 guilds on one team and then they have a lesser guild that can't even like meet Rex, or they can't pull the adequate numbers, which is another thing that we had to organize, was trying to figure out the node for numbers and trying to gauge everybody's participation and stuff. It was a really big process. It's very difficult, but I'm glad that we actually managed to pull it off. Was it the most optimal thing ever? Nah, definitely not, but it's trial and error. It's going to take time for us to iron out the details if we even get that far. And the reason I say that is like if we get that far is because it was honestly an unenjoyable experience, not because like the guilds were unbearable or anything like that. Actually, in my personal opinion, I think we all work really well together. I'm not even kidding. Like it sucks that we all like have our own personal issues with one another, and I know some people like are just not willing to drop that shit, but like dude, just hearing like my leadership, myself talk to the other leaderships and their like party and things like that, and we're all just yapping and getting along, it's just like, dude, why do we hate each other? Why do we dislike each other? It's so stupid because like the more you talk to the opposition, the more you realize you have in common with that person, and it's actually stupid that we don't get along for whatever fucking reason. And it's just a little stupid shit. It's always like some dumb shit about PvP, or somebody said something stupid in chat or whatever. There are the players and members that do take things to an extreme, and that they drop personal information, pictures, and that they make fun of people and of the way they look and things like that. And that shit, in my opinion, that's unacceptable. Like that shit is no, like I don't know. Like you can't just talk about people's like appearances and stuff like that, and then just like drop names and dox people and throw addresses. I'm not even kidding. I believe even at one point, one of the EU partners, I think one of the ones that quit, I think he mentioned at one point one of the EU players found his sister's Facebook and then like fucking deep faked her into a porno, and I'm like, what the fuck is that? Like, who does that? So I don't know, like shit like that, like that's unacceptable, and like you just like there's no hope for that person, right? Like that's just community policing, and then like up until PA does something about it, you know what I mean? Like that's the shit that has to be policed by the community, and they have to be blackballed by the community in order for them to just have a better behavior, because they clearly like enabling that shit is just something that you shouldn't do, because it's just crossing so many boundaries and lines. But I'm talking specifically about the tiny shit. Like I'm talking like, oh, this one node war, you guys did some scum ass tactic and you're bitches for life. It's like that shit, that's useless. that is useless. Just communicating with some of the other guilds being on our team, you just start to realize that you share more in common with them than what you initially thought, and there's actually barely a reason for beef. And you got to remember, some of this shit dials back years, like even before my time. Like, this is long before me, and I've just adopted it because I'm in the guild, right? And it's just the brainwash effect. You know, every guild has that shit. Every guild I've ever been in has their brainwashing tactics where it's like, this guild is this guild is that, this guild is ass, this guild's good, whatever. I fuck with this guild because of this reason, and then you just kind of like, oh, I'm in this guild, I should have the same mindset. You know, it's mob mentality. So a lot of the times, that's kind of the case where it's just like, yo, you just hate this person via proxy. Like, that's sometimes it's that simple, and that's really stupid. So like, this right here just showcases that like we can work together, that we can get along, we can actually just set shit to the side and figure something out. So all of our members in our guild, you got to remember, these GMs that all came together and agreed to fight each other and create content, they're GMs of guilds with 70 members or higher in their guilds, all the way up to 100, especially the bigger ones that are in the top 5. All those guilds are maxing out at like 90 to 100. So they got to think about those members and their general happiness and how they can, you know, create an environment where they can feel at home, build a community, and try and, you know, build loyalty and all kinds of synergy in that area. And that's very difficult to do when half the game fucking hates you and refuses to, you know, interact with you at all. So not only does it kill competition, it also just kills growth. It kills progression. And it doesn't just go for the guilds that are on the top, right? That goes for a lot of the baby guilds too, because right now there's honestly no guilds that are forming and creating progression to where they're going to be competition eventually. Like right now, like I'm in Sacred, this is the #1 guild, right? There's not a single guild that is being created right now where I'm keeping an eye on them, like, oh, they're going to be a problem in like 6 months or something. Like, every guild I've ever seen that has aspirations to try and PvP and build, they just don't have the leadership, they don't have the time, they don't have the, you know, the members to try and delegate their jobs to. 90% of the time when it comes to just building a guild, it just comes down to leadership, and that's in anything. Like, if you want to build a boat guild, leadership, you got to figure out how to organize all the boats, you got to figure out how to do the T10 payouts, you got to figure out who's worth it, who's not worth it, and then how you're going to communicate that to people, so on and so forth, right? And the same thing goes for like PvP guilds. You know, you got to figure out your deflex, your flex, your ball, your composition, you got to get your shock collars, you got to get your flex lead, deflex lead, so on and so forth, right? Like, all these GMs, for them to just set the beef to the side and just think about their members and how they can create a good day for them is admirable, and all of them just big ups that they did that shit, right? But the game sucks, and that's the point of this video. That, like, the game sucks. Like, imagine this, right? You do this monumental task. Janeway manages the impossible. She gets all the GMs that hate each other for whatever X amount of reasons to finally put it to the side, to create content and actually go for fights and not hide from each other and actually go out and fight, right? Like, she does that, and guess what? The game doesn't fucking work. I'll just show you guys my POV of some of the clips that I got from the war. The war went on for about an hour and several minutes, I want to say. A little bit over, actually. I think it was like hour 20 or something. I don't remember, but it was definitely over an hour. So just go ahead and check this out, and then we'll talk a little bit after. The game crashed again. I'm losing it. So as you can see, like, yeah, it's a giant fucking problem. Like, it's really bad. I crashed multiple times. I lagged everywhere. Half my damage isn't registering. I'm just like, it's struggle tier. And I have to emphasize on why this matters. And it matters because you literally have people that have important jobs in these wars. Like, I don't know if it's intended by PA for the people to have this much leadership in a guild, but like when it comes to these alliance fights and trying to set shit up, it's not an easy task where it's just like you drop a fort and then you just go, you just let it rip. Like, no, there's communication that goes in there. There's coordination. There was rules this time. There was even rules. I think one of the rules was you can't CTG from the start of the match. You can't like you can't build in any cheese spots. And on top of that, you had to respect the map. So building, you were only allowed to build on the north side if you were on the north side team, and then if you were on the south side, then you're only allowed to build on the south side. So Sacred's alliance and their team was south side, so we were over here. We were built in these general spots up here in the south side, and then the opposing team was over here on the north side, so they had, you know, these up here. So the middle was off limits to my knowledge. I don't believe you were able to place in the middle. I believe you had to honor the whatever side you were on. I wasn't a part of the negotiations because I wasn't at the podcast, so I don't really remember the full details and rules, but I'm pretty sure you were only supposed to spawn from the north and then the south, and then that's like, or not spawn, but like drop your fort, you know what I mean? But it doesn't matter, right? Like it does, like you could drop in the center, you could drop south, you could drop left, right, up, down, all around. It doesn't matter. The game doesn't allow you. You go through all that trouble creating a monumental accomplishment where you're able to get everybody to drop the ego, drop the, you know, drop everything and just say fuck it, let's fight. Getting everybody on board with that mindset, and then the game shits itself and you can't even have fun. And a lot of people make that argument where they're like, you know, it's BDO, you know, it's a sandbox MMO. You have to find fun in the game. You create your own fun. And I agree with that to a degree, right? If you're a grinder, for example, and you hate grinding, you got to find a way to make it fun, because that's 90% of the game. You have to actually grind. You have to find a way to do it, right? You have to find a way to keep it palatable so that way you can keep grinding and keep making gains. So one of the ways that I do that is by quite literally just trying to maximize trash and trying out different classes and being able to grind efficiently and breaking like my own personal records, right? So let's say I go to Giants, right, and I pull like 35k or some shit. It's like, all right, my goal now is to try and beat that record by doing these minor tweaks or whatever. It's kind of like achievement hunting to a degree. You're just trying to perfect something, and it takes a lot of practice to do so. And a lot of people do that, where they're constantly trying to beat their personal scores, their personal best. And it's the same thing for anything else in the game. If you're a life skiller, for example, some people have crazy goals and they're like, I want to make 10,000 of every elixir or some shit like that, or I want to make 40,000 giant strouts, or I don't know. Like, people make goals for themselves and make up content for them in order to have fun, right? And for PvP, you don't really get to do that, because PvP is a two-way street, right? It takes two to tango, so you obviously can't you can't just be like, well, I'm gonna create content solo. Like, it doesn't work like that. There has to be somebody to fight in order for there to be PvP, correct? So you obviously have to have a second party to throw down with, or else you're just hitting the air like I'm doing here. Like, this is like what? No, this is useless. This doesn't do anything. This is terrible. So whenever all the guilds try to come together to have a good time and create a good fight for everybody, the game can't even support it. We had a 3v3, a minor 3v3. I need you guys to realize that. A 3v3, and the server basically shit itself. You had people not loading in, you had me crashing every 30 seconds, you had like just everybody was struggle tier. It wasn't just me or anybody else, everybody was struggle tier. It was very difficult. So even when we go for these, like, you know, fights where we're actually trying to do shit and create content, it sucks that like it gets stifled by the game not being able to even perform everything correctly, and it makes these events and these situations much more difficult. And imagine like having to be a GM and explain to your guild, it's like, man, that wasn't the greatest thing ever, and I know everybody was lagging, and then you have to ask them to come do it again the next week after having that shit experience the first week. That sucks. That sucks. I don't envy being a GM right now, because like that is ass. How do you convince your guild to basically go to round 2 electric boogaloo, and then you're just gonna lag? You're just gonna lag for another hour, and it's like after the first few times that happens, you start to lose members. They lose heart. They lose all patience with the guild, and they're like, I'm just gonna go find another guild that's, you know, that I'm gonna find happiness in, because right now this guild's making me mad. That happens. That's happened a lot. And I wish it wasn't like that, but like that's why I'm talking about it, because I think it's important to realize that now that the community is somewhat, you know, coming together and we're putting things to the side and trying to make the best out of this game, the game won't even let us. And that's even worse. I think that's what sucks the most, is that this is such a rare occurrence, and like I don't even know how long this is going to last. All it takes is one of the guilds to just pull out and be like, you know what, I don't want any part of this, I hate you, I hate this. Like that's all it takes is one person to not want to do this anymore, and all fights are off the table and bets are gone, and there's no more setup fights, there's no more guaranteed good content, there's none of that. That's all it takes, is somebody to get frustrated and just pull out of the fucking fights. And then now we're back to square one, and we have no content anymore, we have no PvP, we have nothing. It's just empty game again. I don't want to go back to that. I genuinely don't. I like what we have going on. I like the fact that we're all working together and trying to fight. I like that we actually get along and it's not as fucking toxic or anything like that. This right here, this makes me happy. Like, if you guys have ever asked me, which some of you have, like why I'm so depressed on this game, like this is the reason. This is the exact reason I said what I said on Blue's podcast, and why I'm pissed off and why I don't want to play the fucking game. It's just like dealing with shit like this. Like, I get excited for something, I take part in this giant fucking thing where we're all working together, and it wasn't even enjoyable for me because the game just would not let me play the game, and it would not work, and it did that for so many other players that it just sucks that we got robbed out of an experience, even though like it was such a long setup. That is the worst feeling in the world, and that's why this game makes me upset. Like, the community to a degree also makes me upset, because I feel like, again, we could have been doing setup fights for a long time now, but I also just feel like no, we can't, because of how the performance is. So like it's just even more difficult now. Like, yeah, we could have set the beef to the side earlier and tried to, you know, not be as angry with each other, so we can at least try and make attempts at something. But like, I can't even use that as an excuse anymore, because all of us are working together now. All of us have actually communicated. We're sitting in parties, laughing and goofing around and doing all this shit, and like there's no excuse anymore. I can't even say that. Like, we tried, we did it. The only thing that held us back was the game, and that's awful. Next gen has to come out as soon as possible. It literally has to come out as soon as possible. It's the only thing that matters, because like this game's PvP scene, we've lost so many guilds, so many players. Like, there's no new competition, there's no new blood, there's no progression on leadership of how to build a guild and things like that. And we're still stuck with these alliances that are basically covering every single node and stifling growth. And then on top of that, we're feeding nodes to guilds that don't even deserve it. And that's every alliance is doing that shit. Every alliance is doing that shit. Not a single person is not guilty of that shit. We're all doing dumb shit for alliances, and it's all based on just pay and like not losing and just making sure that, you know, like you're getting paid and things like that. So at the end of the day, it's really upsetting that this wasn't the most positive outcome. I still think it's a W, because we're 1000% actually communicating and talking with each other, and we still, even despite that the first one was a little rough, we're still completely down to do it again. Not a single GM is actually like no, I don't want to do that again. There's nobody saying that, which is great. It just means that we haven't, like, it's not a blown operation yet, and we can actually still work with each other, and that's what I want to keep. I want to keep that working relationship with all these guilds, because this is the only way that I'm gonna get to play the game doing what I like to do, and that's PvP. I like the PvP. I like the large scale. I like doing my deflex job. I like doing like everything that I do in Node War. I enjoy doing it very much, and as long as I get to do that, I really don't have a lot of complaints. I don't like running circles. I don't like grinding. I don't like doing any of that shit. I just want to log on to the game, PvP for a while, and then get off. And I really hope that we can maintain this working relationship, so that way we can keep doing this stuff. Fix the game. That's it. Fix the game. Closing statement. Let's get out of here, boys. All right, sorry this went on too long. I will talk to you guys in the next one. If you have any extra additions, any comments or things like that, go ahead and put it down below. If you want to, I'll answer whatever I can, but that is it. I will talk to you guys later. Bye bye.